Hey guys! So, in this video we are going to talk about large problems and small problems. So let's get into it. Now, what do I mean by large problems and small problems? Well, you see, I thought it could be interesting to share some experiences as to what I find to be the most common issues in a small project and in a large project. And kind of some of the things that I've learned so far about working in both sides of projects. Now let's define a small project. Well, first and foremost, a small project, I would argue, is the sort of thing that you do yourself or with a handful of people. It's something that it's not a finished product, it's not making any money, it's really in the proof of concept stage of things. And maybe even up to the point where you're just starting out to earn some money. And a large scale project is the sort of thing that has this, like, it's a project that is fairly large, has a established company around it. It's the sort of project that has already like a bunch of stakeholders, it's already making money, that sort of thing. We're talking enterprise level stuff, right? So let's get into that. Well, if we start with a small project, one of the most common things that is an issue when you start a small project, apart from, of course, money. Like money, you should always know something, guys. Money is always an issue when you are just starting out. Why is money important? Well, it's not important depending on your project type. I mean, if you're doing your own personal little thing, it doesn't matter at all. That's the beauty of software development. It only costs you time and knowledge for the most part. But you should also know that if your ambition is to actually make something of said project, you are going to need some type of money. It's going to have to come from somewhere, because you are not going to run your little project on your own computer. You are going to use most likely a cloud service or something of that nature, and these people charge you a little bit of money. Not in the beginning. You can find free tiers that are fairly, they're not perfect, but they're pretty good. And usually it starts out very easily. And honestly, I've found it to be very easy these days, at least, to get a proof of concept off the ground and just get some user feedback and stuff of that nature. That's great. But that brings us to problem number 2, and that is that when you first start out, you don't really know what's going to work. You only have an idea. And that's where the biggest problem at small scale come. It's very often that I see people try to go for high quality. They try to go for like building something that is at the same quality level or perceived quality level as one of the big projects. The biggest mistake that you can make, assuming now, because there are if your entire business idea is about luxury, if your entire project is about creating some amazing type of user experience, I truly feel sorry for you, because that is one of the trickiest things to do early stage. Creating a small, like a proof of concept for something that should feel like high quality takes a lot of resources, it takes a lot of time. It can be done. I'm not saying that it can't. It's very tricky. It's very, very tricky to create a sense of luxury at small scale. But it is possible. If you have some really good UX people, it can absolutely be done. But at small scale, on average, what I see people do is that they invest too much into things that they don't really know are going to work out. In fact, I've found it to be much more efficient to do what we call an MVP in the industry. What is an MVP? MVP stands for minimum viable product. And basically what it means is that since you don't know how things are going to turn out, you should build the absolute simplest, dumbest, easiest thing. It just has to work, and then get some user feedback on that thing to verify your theory. Now this is extremely hard for a lot of people to grasp, because we like to think in terms of things being finished. Think of it this way. If you buy a car, you have a mental picture of how that car should look. But in MVP land, when you buy a car, the first iteration of that car is most likely just going to be maybe the body And the next iteration, there's going to be wheels on it. And then the third iteration is going to be a steering wheel. Like, you see what I'm saying? You're shipping it in chunks. That feels very unnatural to a lot of people, and I have had quite a few issues trying to convey this idea to business people, because business people do not like this approach. It's really shit, like they really don't like it, because it's very tricky for them to go into a meeting room and try to pitch a half finished idea, because, you know, they have a vision of how it should look and that's what they're going to push for. But don't let them, because trust me, it will go wrong. I promise you it will go wrong. And the reason I can promise you that is because what usually happens is that, as I said, you have no idea what's actually going to be, what's going to work and what's not going to work. That means the more you build, statistically the likelier you are to build something that's not going to produce any value for the company. Most projects, most companies, they need a few tries to get an idea off the ground. And the more time you invest in the first idea, the more likely you are to just waste a bunch of time on something you have to throw away later. And that brings us to the next issue. The next issue is that you write the sort of software that is going to be high quality when in fact you're changing it all the time. I mean, I'm working on a few projects now where the code base is starting to rot. I'm already producing legacy, and I have to, because the nature of the project is changing so rapidly that I just have to change things over and over and over. Like, I can't keep the code clean because we're changing things so quickly. So those are the most common problems for a small scale project. Oh, and one last thing, user feedback. User feedback is extremely hard to come by. At small scale, you think that your friends are going to help you out with testing your project, and that people are going to love your idea and they're going to do your testing for you and give you user feedback. They won't. Trust me. In the beginning, you almost have to force people to test your project, to verify things, to give you user feedback. At scale, it's not much of a problem because you have so many people using the system. Small scale, whole different story. All right, large scale. The two biggest problems at large scales. Number one biggest problem is coordination. It is very, very tricky to coordinate people at large scale. Usually I will say that the problem isn't to write the software, like the code is the easy part. The hard part is to make sure that you write the correct thing so that you don't break something else. Most of the time at large scale, you spend more time adding code to already existing code or changing code. That is why I keep telling people that at large scale type systems, such as in Java, for example, these things are extremely important. I've worked at my previous job, massive super code base all in PHP. Changing that code base was actually very tricky. It took a lot of time because you have to, you can't change a loosely typed language with as much confidence as you can with a strictly typed one. And since that's most of what you're doing, it becomes very, very helpful and a lot of time it saves a lot of time to have a typing system at large scale. Which brings us to the next thing, testing. Testing is one of the most common things as well. Like, you don't think so, but over time, the larger the project, the more overhead, the more stuff you have to do for every release. Because remember, in theory, every time you change your software, you could have broken something that's already there. That's why in a really large system, it takes a lot of time to test it. You change something and now you have to verify that the project is still working. That's why it becomes very important to invest in automated testing, things of this nature, because it just takes so much time for a person to go through all the flows and check that all the configurations are working. It's actually one of the major issues when it comes to large scale projects, just to verify that everything is working. Those are the two main ones. And I suppose that apart from that, large-scale projects have one last thing that small-scale projects don't have as an issue, and that is load. Load is a big problem. Operations, this sort of thing, infrastructure, all that stuff starts to matter. All those fancy things that you hear public speakers talk about, and that's why you should use Go because it's so performant, yada yada. All that stuff, it doesn't matter at small scale, but it starts to matter a lot at large scale projects. That's why you need to have the mindset that in the beginning, small scale project, iterate quickly and start taking these more advanced concepts such as load and performance and all that stuff more seriously at scale. You have to wait until you get to that point, because when you get to that point, you're going to have to pay the cost for it. It's actually something that a fair amount of juniors don't really understand. It might sound sexy with Kubernetes and Docker and all that stuff, and that's sure, for someone who doesn't do this professionally, it sounds sexy. But trust me, guys, nothing is as simple as this standard little small application that you run on your own laptop and you just deploy with a single command. That's the thing that it's actually a very simple approach. It may not be sexy, but trust me, that sexiness that Kubernetes and all these advanced tools bring to the table are really just a cost that you pay in order for the system to work, because the system is now so complicated. It's great fun to play around with it, but trust me, it's not so fun when your entire system starts breaking and your boss comes in and he's angry because the system went down again and you have to figure out all these interconnections. Trust me, that complexity is not fun. It's a necessary evil that you have to pay, that cost you have to pay in order to have the system running. But trust me, don't go there too early. You're gonna get there. If your project scales up, you're gonna get there. So have the mindset that you are prepared to go to that sort of scale, but don't start out that way. So to summarize, one of the most important things, regardless of if you have a small project or a large project, is to know which type of software you're writing. What size of project are you working on? So you don't make decisions that make sense for a big project in a small project. And you can't be naive about performance and all that stuff in a large project as you can with a small project. That's at least how I think about it. Have a great day.